Good morning, all. We are live now with Harry Atherton, direct from Normandy, with me, Keith Hayes, direct from nowhere right now. How are you, Harry?
Well, I'm fine. I'm fine. Typical Norman day, rainy day. It's we get lots of we get English weather essentially in Normandy. It's not very different to the south of England, so we're in the same weather pattern. But when the sun shines, it is beautiful, just as England is. So we can't complain. It keeps it green, keeps it healthy, and a little bit of rain. That's just fine. You need a variety in climate, I think, because in countries where we've both lived and worked, if it's just beautiful weather all the time, it's you don't get the contrast, and it's can be boring. Can
Yeah,
be boring.
absolutely.
My
And,
good lady wife, in fact, is from a South Sea island and New Caledonia, and they do have seasons, but even in the so-called cold season, which is our summer, they you can walk around, in a pair of shorts and bare feet. I mean, it's amazing. And don't even go outside when when their real summer comes. In our winter, you're talking about 50 degrees. And yeah.
well, on the flip side, my late wife was born in Manitoba,
Hmm.
and she can remember a chill factor, as it's called, of minus 60 degrees.
Oh, indeed. Well, I've experienced that in Quebec. When I lived in Quebec for 10 years, and just outside of Montreal, and the chill factor was quite important because, and in fact, I don't know about Manitoba, but in Quebec, it is a very dry cold. And it does not permeate the clothing so much. So the actual coldness does come from the chill factor, and that makes the difference. You can walk outside at minus 20, minus 30 in your shirt sleeves, and you're okay for about a minute. And by contrast, mind you, in the summer in Quebec, the summer is warm, but it's a very humid warmth. It's instead of a dry cold in the winter, you've got a humid warmth in the summer. And if you go outside, your shirt is just absolutely dripping with perspiration within a minute. So it's a curious version of the climate, but the chill factor is what pushes the figures up to astronomical heights. Like as you say, minus 60. But there you go. There's the contrast again. 1 meter of snow in the evening, and another meter of snow during the night, and a meter of snow the following morning. And leave your house by the upstairs bedroom window. Yeah.
Well, Harry, a lot has been going on in the world, both in the UK and globally. And you watch these things for us fastidiously, and your comments are very perceptive. So, what tops the list for you this morning?
I think there's so much happening. It's an overload of news at the moment. A lot of it, as we know, centered around Trump, Greenland, the Chagos, even the scare about Canada taking over Canada, which I don't believe for 1 minute. All of this is just talk. I think the important thing to remember is that that Trump, the man, is quite detestable. But I rejoice in the breath of fresh air of him turning over the apple cart and forcing the Europeans to face up to their responsibilities. They've been, benefiting the peace dividend, and the Middle America taxpayer has been paying for their defense since the Second World War. And it's just wrong. I think America has been abused, and he's trying to put it right. And they're so wishy-washy. I mean, if you take the current British government and the previous British government, the so-called conservatives, useless as they were, and what we've got in France, Macron company, they're just wishy-washy, flimsy people. They're not leading. They're not inspiring. They haven't given either of their countries a sense of identity that needs to follow and be strong. And they just sort of pay them lots of money not to work, paying everybody lots of money not to work. So I'm not surprised that Trump, who, as I say, is not the easiest guy in the world, given to these outbursts. Some of his statements are 100% accurate. Starmer and Macron and others have got to put their countries in shape before they start criticizing and complaining about the tariffs. And in these tariff wars, I mean, we're getting one side of it from the European press, but the adverse tariffs that have been in existence for a long time against American products, not only tariffs against them, but certain products just banned outright. And, the famous classic example of so-called chlorinated chicken. You had the word chlorinated, and of course it excuses the ban. And everybody, oh my God, I don't want to eat chlorinated stuff, but you wouldn't believe what they're eating already. And so they just ban a whole industry. Never mind, put a tariff against it. So we've just, Europe has milked America. And going back to the defense, NATO, I mean, it's time an American president stood up and said, look, you've got to be counted, you've got to pay your share. And you can't simply live under the protective umbrella of the middle American taxpayer. So I'm all for what Trump is doing. I don't like the guy at all, but it's certainly a very welcome breath of fresh air that is, as I say, upset the apple cart.
Yes. The question of tariffs and so on, and the one-sided reporting. What tariffs do you think are honourable on both sides?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in tariffs. I think that we should have free trade. I think this battle of quid pro quo, reciprocal tariffs, doesn't help anybody in the long run. Certainly doesn't help the computer. It pushes up prices, and it reduces the flow of world trade. So it's impoverishing both sides. So on the principle that I don't want any tariffs at all, we should have free trade. What we should do is regulate the quality of and have a mechanism in place to inspect that quality, and to see that each side is being protected. We're not bringing dangerous material in, food that is bad for you, or products that could be technically dangerous to human health. So we do need control, but we don't need tariffs. I would love to see a tariff-free world. So I don't think any of these tariffs you can describe as fair. They're simply reciprocal and being used as a means of economic warfare, because that's what modern warfare is about. It's not guns and bullets anymore. Well, it is in Ukraine and one of two places, unfortunately. But essentially, the war is a war of informational war. It's a commercial war. It's strategically placing your pawns on the economic chessboard in such a way that you can get advantage over the adversary, and building up the industries necessary to give you a very strong economy. Well, we've let our industries go to the wall, and other countries that are seeking to establish their place in the world, like China, they've encouraged their industries, and they've cheated massively in doing that. So, state support to a point where they'll dump material at a fraction of the cost of it making it in foreign markets to destroy the domestic ability of those countries to produce the same goods. But essentially, going back to your original question, it would be good to have no tariffs whatsoever. They're artificial. They're artificial by nature. Yeah. Just as I say, a form of economic warfare now.
Yeah. I mean, there are side effects too, aren't there? I mean, the Smoot-Hawley Act of something like 1928, which imposed almost 100% tariffs on American goods, believing that America could be self-sufficient. It's said to have triggered the Second World War. I mean, nothing could have been more of an evil consequence than that from a an economic act which was meant to protect people.
Well, again, it's a question of evaluating economies. I mean, if you look at Europe after the Second World War, it represented something like approaching 40% of the world's economy. I doubt if it's half that now, maybe 20%. It's thrown that away. It's allowed its industrial decline, agricultural decline. I mean, obviously, most economies now are service economies. They transitioned from being an agricultural economy to an industrial economy to be a service economy, and now it's even post-industrial service. But the structure of the British or French economies is just not there. They've allowed many of their major industrial crown jewels to either be bought up and sold to somebody or expose them to artificial competition from abroad, and just simply to please the home audience by getting cheaper this and cheaper that. And even the European countries themselves have set up manufacturing plants in different parts of the world, cheaper parts of the world, so they can stay profitable. So I think we've shot ourselves in the foot there. And going back to the original point, I think Trump is recognizing that, is trying to put America back on its feet industrially, is being very American, very pro-American. He's elected as the president of America, not of the world, and he's doing what he thinks is right for his country. And we have people who are living on other principles now. We've got Starmer, for instance, giving away the Chagos Islands. Not only giving them away, having to pay to use them afterwards. And worst of all, I mean, can you imagine giving them to Mauritius, who never ever had the Chagos Islands? The Chagos Islands belong to the people the natives who were born there, and they were forcibly removed, and now they don't get a say in the matter. They're getting nothing out of it. And it was never a part of Mauritius. And the Mauritius, of all places, cozying up to China, it's just an unbelievable decision to give away such a vitally strategic military base as the Chagos Islands, the San Diego Garcia. Yeah.
Now, I've never been to Mauritius, but I came pretty close about 8 or 9 years ago. And I'm told that it was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. If you really wanted to set up something dodgy, Mauritius was the place to go. Have you got any experience of that part of the world?
I've never been to Mauritius. I have heard the same stories. It's not a very big country. It's a country of about 1.4 million people. Its annual budget is I think about 1.4 million people, is it? I'm not sure, but budget is about 1.3 billion. So, I mean, when we talk about Trump buying Greenland, which might cost him 700 billion, he could buy Mauritius in no time flat. In fact, there's a very strong possibility that the Americans desperately need Diego Garcia as the military presence and military foothold in the Indian Ocean. And if Britain gives it up, they'll simply buy it off the Mauritians. If they turned around and offered the Mauritians, I don't know, 13, let me get my figures right again. I think the Mauritian economy is about $13 billion. So if they offered them something like that, which is a fraction of what they would pay for Greenland, they would own Mauritius. Never mind the Chagos Islands. Yeah. And I'm sure there are also greedy hands in Mauritius that would like to get their hands on that and retire into the sunset. So, no, I mean, money, power talks, and we've given that up. And in Europe, we've gone for all sorts of strange moral values that follow a sense of guilt, I don't know, from the slave trade, from colonialism. I mean, we're a spent force, and I think and Trump is rubbing it in and telling us,
yes.
As I say, detestable guy, but speaking the truth.
One of the things that past American presidents have said is that they've lost all confidence in the United Nations because it's led by third world countries, none of whom pay their subs, but have a disproportionate sense of power. Where does the United Nations stand in the world at the moment?
Well, the United Nations, if you're talking about corruption, I mean, it's the very symbol of corruption in the world, which is understandable in many ways because each nation, like each individual in life, is out in their own interests. Everybody is selfish. I mean, they're out for what benefits them. And each country, they wheel and deal at the United Nations, and the way it's structured, that's one of the ways these little countries, which themselves are corrupt internally, many of them, can put pressure on the big countries. But I think the United Nations is a spent force, and I've long suspected the Americans will pull out of it, and in fact, I don't see what purpose it serves. I mean, the League of Nations fell apart, and I think the United Nations has lost its moral authority a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had something to do with the United Nations in Kosovo.
Mm-hmm.
Very odd organization
Mm-hmm.
on the ground, anyway, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. I
didn't consider it any sort of force, but
well, any decision made by a group of people. I don't know how many countries are in the United Nations, close to 200, I guess, I think. But to getting all of them to agree with each other on any issue, you're going to have an agreement, level of agreement equal to the lowest common denominator. You're never going to get the right decision. You're going to get a compromise decision all the time, and the wishy-washy decision. And you get all sorts of strange rules and regulations that are brought in, which which bind the major nations to, I don't know, some of them go along with it because of a sense of historical guilt, colonialism, as I say, and other things. But but I shouldn't start on colonialism because it was a two-way street. The colonial powers certainly did well out of the deal and milked the colonies, but by golly, did they bring a more civilized form of living, in a sense. I'm appalled quite recently. India has decided to ban or change all of the railway uniforms that the staff wear because they were too reminiscent of the colonial style of railway union. Well, why don't they rip up all the railway tracks as well? Because they wouldn't have had a railway if the British hadn't built it off. I mean, India, an emerging, powerful country, great possibilities, lovely country. I mean, nothing against India, but it's the legacy of the British Raj. Yes, it was very handy and made a lot of money for Britain, but it sure as hell put India on the right track.
Yeah.
And the nation, I don't know how many different ethnic communities, languages, traditions, religions, and to put that all together into one piece and try and make it work, which is still a challenge for the leaders in India, but all that is based on the old colonial blueprint. They've just simply continued the same procedures.
Yeah, the funny thing is that people fall out on these things. I had friends, very good friends. The only disagreement that we had was over whether Britain should, over Brexit. They were ardent Europeans, and they wouldn't, even when we were in the pub, would not permit any debate about it because they didn't like the arguments. And quite often, decisions are made on that basis. Is don't listen to a balanced argument. Just listen to the one that was the most vociferous, and leave it at that. Thank you very much, done and dusted.
Well, I think whichever side of the divide you're on in the Brexit debate, it seems to be pretty logical that you're never going to make a a Portuguese out of a Norwegian, or a Greek out of a German. I mean, and vice versa. The interests of these countries are so diverse, so opposed, that if it was seen to be to create a unified power, economically or military or something like that, but it never did. Europe has grown more slowly as a group of nations than virtually every other economy on earth. And certainly it is not a military power. They talk about having a military arm, but they can't even agree on what, everybody's buying different tanks or guns or weapons. And no, I mean, it's a bit of a joke, Europe, I think. And it's a dream. It's a noble dream. But the individual interests of each country, which are constantly changing, and also the individual members. Why would the British man and woman be governed by somebody who hates Britain or has no empathy with Britain, from another country that has never been to Britain, and accept all our rules from people who have no empathy with us? I can't understand that. I mean, we need our own independence, and we need to stand on our own 2 feet. And does that mean I'm a Brexiteer? I suppose it does, but it just means I don't believe in in trying to create one single identity from nations which have got very proud histories and proud different ambitions and different characters. We're very different in Europe. It's a totally different set of. You can make a country out of different immigrant constituents, just as America's done over the years. But I don't think, as I say, you're ever going to make a German into a Greek or a Portuguese into a Norwegian. No, they're very different people.
Would you agree that that's the soft underbelly of Putin's dream of reuniting the old Soviet Union? That he wants to take people of different histories, economies, traditions, and so on, and forge them back into the one great big Soviet empire.
Well, I think he dreams of empire, and I think he'd like to reconstitute the so-called Russian Empire. But I think we worry too much about that. Russia is it's impressive in terms of its military power, nuclear power, not so much traditional orthodox military power. It's getting a hammering in Ukraine by a much smaller country. But you've got to bear in mind that Russia has got an economy which is about the same as, I don't know, Italy maybe. It's not a powerful country anymore, and I think it's on the borders of going under economically. I don't think Russia will last much longer if this war goes on much longer. It can't afford it, and if they put the brake on allowing all of this illegal oil shipment that keeps them alive financially, if the hundreds of tankers going through the channel right under our noses, illegally selling Russian oil that is supposedly banned, and we're doing nothing about it. But once that supply is cut off, I think they won't be able to finance their war and their silly ambitions anymore. The other argument, of course, is that Trump doesn't want them to go under. He needs them probably as a counterbalance to China. He wants to get them out of China's grasp and bring them back into some sort of a European or Western, into the Western fold. Otherwise, they'll be obliged to throw in a lot simply to survive with China, and China plus Russia plus North Korea and others constitutes a formidable opposition. So Trump is trying to divide and conquer and make sure that he doesn't totally destroy Russia, because it acts as a counterbalance to China.
What happened to Japan? I mean, for a while there, everything was Japanese, just the same as it's Chinese at the moment. and we spoke glowingly of this super great economy in a little island, but all that seems to have gone south. What happened there, Harry?
Well, I think the same thing happened in Japan as happened in Germany after the war. The never again idea, the German post-war constitution, is designed to prevent the nation ever swinging too far one way and becoming a militaristic entity again. And the same thing happened in Japan. The embracing of peace, and they wouldn't even call their army and navy. They call it the Japanese Defense Force and things like this. But that's changing now, and the balance is changing, and Japan is feeling very much of a threat from China, and is rearming very, very quickly. And Japan is developing some quite amazing weapons at the moment. Probably a superior set of weapons than either China or North America has got. Some of their new missile concepts are quite amazing. Missiles that no longer just rockets, but they can think for themselves, and if they see something coming to knock them down, they can move out of the way and go around it. I mean, it's an incredible development in terms of Japanese defense. They're waking up, and we've got this lady whose name I don't know, and I couldn't pronounce it if I did know it, who is Prime Minister. And she seems to be quite a go-getter. So we haven't heard the last of Japan, and it too will act as a counterbalance to China's emergence as a very strong regional, if not world power.
Yeah. Now, that's interesting what you say, because Japan is obviously going to be a threat to a good many emerging economies and emerging military forces. Do you think there will be any concerted efforts to?
Any concern that they would have military, territorial ambitions like they did in the 30s and 40s? No.
Well, I mean, I asked that question because I think it's valid. But what I'm asking is, will some of the others gang up on us at this stage to try and nobble some of its advanced technology?
No, I don't think so. I think what will happen in Asia generally is that the alliances will form, and nations with their individual interests in mind will choose to ally themselves with those who they feel will support their own aspirations, interests. And no, China with its Silk Road initiative, trying to get everybody on board and influence them financially, and as far as Africa, wherever, and of course this whole question of getting routes through the Arctic. Everybody's pushing and shoving to get their own interest, and Japan will simply be one of the influences in that part of the world. And I think it will become a more important influencer than it has been during this post-war hiatus, when, like Germany, the never again, we don't ever want to be seen as a militaristic nation ever again. But that's in their genes. I mean, the samurai warrior spirit is something that will not go away, and it's part of their heritage. And I think now that Japan is waking up, it'll become quite a counterbalance. It already is economically and industrially, and I think militarily it will reestablish itself and be a counterbalance to China.
Let's move away from that part of the world and go to the Middle East.
To?
The Middle East.
Sorry, I missed that.
The Middle East.
Oh, the Middle East, yes. Well, we've got, that's a bit of a mess as usual. The Middle East it's a little bit like saying South America, as if it was one ethnic and unified entity. That they're all Arabs and they're all believe in follow the Islamic religion. It's not true. If you go to South America, every country in South America is so different from the next one. you can't believe. You just move from across the River Plate from Argentina to Uruguay, and you're into a totally different world. And then the countries at the top end there, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and the difference between Chile and Peru, incredible differences. Well, these differences also exist in the Middle East. And again, they've all got their own, I won't say selfish, natural interests that they need to follow. And some of them are poor, some of them are wealthy, some of them have got oil, some of them not. Some of them feel they're on a mission to change the world, like Iran, the religious and this theocracy, which is now collapsing, hopefully, and will cease to be a threat. But there's no homogeneous entity that can be called the Middle East. It's simply a geographical expression. As I say, just like South America. Now, North America is homogeneous. It's one big society. Whether they like it or not, the Canadians are part of a North American society. They're different to the Americans, but that's different in a way that Arizonans are different from Texans, and Texans are different from people from Kentucky or something. I mean, but it has that North American culture, which makes it part of a whole. That doesn't exist in South America, and it certainly doesn't exist in the Middle East.
Yeah, but whatever the conflicting nations there are always causing lots of trouble. I mean, I've been in Ethiopia. I'm sure you've been in Ethiopia, and not an unpleasant experience. Then suddenly there's a headline that the Ethiopians are being attacked or attacking somebody, and the whole thing goes up in the air again. Where are the weak points in terms of a boundless peace, if you like?
Well, I think the pressures on all these countries are quite different each time. Their histories, their unique nature. I mean, we've just mentioned the Middle East and compared it with South America. Well, how about Africa? As you know, now that you're talking about Ethiopia, and the difference between the component parts of Africa are different as chalk is from cheese. I don't ever see that as a united entity. Each one has their own interests, and they follow them.
Yeah, it doesn't take them away as problem areas, though. Harry, I mean, you mentioned Africa. I mean, huge Nigeria in itself has got several tribes that are quite different to the next tribe, even though they're within the Nigerian border.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if they could only get a president who wasn't corrupt, God only knows what they might achieve. But they haven't, and as a consequence, they're all niggling away at one another. I'm amazed, actually, that there isn't more violence on the African continent than there is. But what's containing it there?
Well, I think the problem in Africa, and we mentioned Nigeria, is the old colonial powers simply sat in some office in London and drew lines across the map without taking into consideration the ethnic makeup of the countries they were dividing. And sometimes they put dividing lines right through the middle of tribes. So half of a tribe ended up on one side or in one country and the other half in another country.
Yes.
And maybe they found themselves a minority in country B, and therefore country A, which had the majority of the tribe, went to war in the interest of trying to protect their tribal relationships. And so when the maps were drawn for Africa, and notably in places like Nigeria, they just led to eventual conflict. And then you get the religious lines of conflict. I mean, you've got the different religions now colliding and slaughtering Christians, or then Christians slaughtering the other side. You know, we think of Christianity as being a benign religion, but it's got a track record which, never mind the Crusades,
Yes.
killing people in the name of God. You know, I mean, and here in France, we've got a stain on our history with the Qatar, the Albigensian Crusades, where because people were practicing perfect Christianity, it was too perfect for the normal Christians, so the normal Christians went down there and slaughtered them in the 1200s. Albigensian War, 1205, I think it was, till about 1246, and we slaughtered them, burned them, put them in large heaps and burned them alive. Wow. In the name of God, our God, the Christian God. Our track record has got a lot to be answered to.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we've got our own fixation with our own crusades and their own medieval period, we don't really hear much about the medieval activities of other countries.
Well, no, and of course since many European countries, their history as a unified entity only begins I mean, we had our first king and first king of all of England only shortly before William the Conqueror came, whereas some of these other countries, their dynasties go back 2,000, 3,000 years. We're relatively newcomers on the block, and so we tend to think of the Roman occupation in Britain, and then with the Dark Ages, and then the individual kingdoms merged into one, and by that time we became a target for outside interests, not least William of Normandy. Our history is very recent. We haven't got any great depth, and of course demographic shift. The Saxons moving over into Anglo-Saxon because they came from Saxony. We became a melting pot, and we didn't gel into a nation until very, very recently. 2 or 3 days ago, by comparison to China or other places. Yeah.
Actually, just as you say, you're famous for your red herrings. Stanley Johnson, Boris Johnson's father, has a bit to do with Mirador. I mean, the way I know him, I can say a charming man. Undoubtedly, he's a bit like Boris, is single-minded about a number of things. But he just republished his book, The Marco Polo Route.
Yes.
And he followed the trade route that Marco Polo forged down to getting into China. The first time he couldn't get in, they blocked him at the border. They knew he was coming. The second time he was clever enough to keep his mouth shut and got through.
Yeah. Well, these are the people who opened up the trade routes to the east. Marco Polo, Vasco da Gama, and others. But what's more interesting is the people who exploited those routes. I don't know whether I've mentioned before, in France we had a character who's little known in history. His name was Jacques Coeur, and arguably he's the richest man who has ever lived. I mean, he would make Elon Musk and Bill Gates look like paupers. With all the money that Bill Gates has got, he could probably run his country, the United States, for 2 or 3 hours. Jacques Coeur had enough money at the time of Charles VII to run her country for 2 years. I mean, that's a comparative measure of wealth. I mean, unbelievable. And he was the one that opened up the spice trade on the routes that Vasco da Gama and Marco Polo before him had discovered, and had 400 ships on the oceans of the world, and bringing all sorts of spices and goods and silks and you name it. He exploited what the original explorers had discovered. But
let's go from the exotic to the mundane. and examine the British scene at the moment.
In the British scene, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, most commentators now are saying that Labour is a spent force. It's made too many mistakes. It could never come back. But from an outsider's point of view, how do you see it?
Well, I see the Labour has Labour represents a protest against the incompetence of the Conservatives. And they had an opportunity to put the nation back on track, and they haven't done it because they're not fit to govern. They don't have any ideas. They don't have a concept of government. They don't know how to lead a nation. They can't inspire a nation. They can just bring in rules and regulations and and destroy the English pub. But bear in mind that this is almost a Newtonian reaction. To each action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. According to Newton's third law, I think it is. They were reacting against the incompetence of the Conservatives. So I think if we were to write off the Conservatives, the Labour, we have to write off the Conservatives too. And that begs the question, is the new line of political thought represented by Farage with his party reform or something similar? I think the upheaval has gone because the Labour Party is no longer the party of the working class, and the Conservatives are no longer conservative in the traditional conservative sense. They've become a bunch of wets, and they've been chased out for it, and they won't admit that they screwed it up badly, and until they do, they haven't got a chance of rehabilitation. So I think that both of those parties are spent forces, and we're going through actually a sea change, a revolutionary change, and whether it's Farage or somebody like him, it's not going to be the same again. I think it's just like the old Liberal Party. I'm not talking about the new Lib Dems. I'm talking about how the old Liberal Party, which governed during the 19th century, it's amazing how quickly it disappeared when it fell off the rails.
Yeah, party fortunes are often ascribed to how strong the party leader is. Is Farage strong enough to ward off any attempts on his leadership? Because let's face it, there are enough big guns moving into the party right now, and as you say, the main parties aren't appealing enough for people from the Conservative Party to rush to. Are likely to rush to reform. Are there inner threats to Farage?
Well, saying is Farage strong enough? Is he capable enough? People talk about what experience has he got, but since Maggie Thatcher, the Conservatives had wishy-washy leaders that were just paper tigers. I mean, Cameron and the rest of them, and I'm not saying they could have been nice enough guys, Rishi Sunak and so on, but and what's the girl that was in there for a while?
Huh? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and but absolutely useless. They were not leaders in any way, shape, or form. They weren't inspiring at all. So I'm sure Farage is going to be a vastly better leader than they would be. They were. Same thing in the United States. I mean, Reagan, and then we get people like, Obama, and of course Biden's Senate. I didn't know which day it was. I mean, which way it was up. And somebody like Obama, who, symbolically the first black president and very articulate, educated, charming guy and all the rest of it, but hadn't a clue how to rule. The United States was sliding into oblivion under him, and even worse with Biden. So Trump, again, is simply a Newtonian reaction to that emptiness. And Farage is the same. Now, how will Farage turn out when he gets into power, because he will get into power, he will be elected, and if he can build up a mature team around him, there's every chance that the path will be open for him to take the drastic measures necessary to put Britain back on track. Now, what will that do to him, Farage the man? Will he become corrupted by power, like many politicians are, beginning to believe in their own press releases? You know, the famous Lord Acton quote is, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, is he a strong personality to the extent that he can resist that? I don't know. We don't know that side of him, and we don't know how power affects people so much. Power has obviously gone to Trump's head, and he's throwing his weight about, and he's a nasty piece of work. The trouble is, he's telling the truth, as I think, at the moment. But it depends how people react to assuming power. If they can retain the modesty and clear vision that is necessary to bring nations back up again, because the life of any nation, of any individual, is up and down. Life of a country, life of an individual is never just a bed of roses. You have problems, you try to solve them, have moments of glory, moments of defeat, it's simply reaction and building a base that is strong enough to sustain a nation or an individual through these difficult times. Can Farage do that? Can he inspire the nation? I think he will make a very good effort, but I think he's going to get the chance. I'm pretty sure he's going to get the chance to do it, and depending on the kind of people he can surround himself with. I'm not sure defecting conservatives is the necessary answer. I think he's got to build a new class of politician that sees life differently. I don't know, but he will get the chance, and I think he'll get the chance sooner rather than later.
Harry, you're a soldier or an ex-soldier. A lot of debate, and it's started to raise its head again recently, is over this business of soldiers in my time there, in the 1970s, did some pretty awful things. One at a time accepted it. 20 years later, a whole group of people that don't accept it and want to go back and make them pay for what they did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. How do you feel about that?
Well, when you train people to do something that is not natural to their personality, which is to pick up a gun and shoot somebody else, nobody wants to do that, any decent thinking person. But you taught, if you're talking about World War II, you taught that the only good German is a bad German. The only good German is a dead German. You are just whipped up into a frenzy, and you go out there and you kill Germans. And I'm sure there are many war atrocities that were committed by the British and Americans and anybody else against the Germans, not as many as they committed against us. But you've been transformed into a killing machine, because it's not natural to be to just want to bring hurt to fellow human beings. They've got wives, families, dogs and cats and children, just like we have. And after the war, we become friends again, and the killing stops. But what had done in those moments of intense nationally induced hatred, you can't hold the individual responsible for that. 20 or 30 years later, the world has moved on, values have moved on, circumstances have moved on. I think it's terribly wrong to be looking to legally punish, soldiers that maybe misbehaved in Northern Ireland or what have you. There were people living on a day-to-day thin thread of fear, seeing their buddies shot down next to them or bombed in their barracks, and you name it. So they were reacting as young men and women would do in those situations, and trained to do so. If we want a world where there are no soldiers and everything will be beautiful, well, why don't we just let the North Koreans take over? And yeah.
Now, I've peppered you with questions to see what your view is of various parts of the world. Is there anything that's exercising your mind, Harry, that you think, I should tell people about that?
Well, I think it's very interesting. The next 2 or 3 days will be most interesting with Davos, the meeting, the heads of state, and everybody seems to be at each other's throats at the moment. There is no fixed view in Europe. Some of the people, some of the leaders, European leaders, are secretly agreeing with Trump. They don't want to break the European ranks at the moment. But I think something's going to come out of it, which will change direction. Now, how would it affect the major issues? How will it affect Greenland? We know that Trump is trying to protect his own backyard with the Venezuelan adventure. I think this year will be a very critical year, and we'll see changes which we don't anticipate at the moment. And I have high hopes that there will be good changes, because the wishy-washy nature of Western governance has gone too far one way, and it will swing back into a more realistic position. Danger is always when the pendulum swings back, it very often swings too far. So we've got to try and control it and get it somewhere in the middle. We don't want extremes. I'm a right-wing thinker, but not a fascist thinker. I believe in clear right and wrong and values and respect for the rule-based order. And against wishy-washy government, and because I think that just hurts the people in the end. So I've got high hopes that this year will bring order of some sort back into the world, and one of the people who will have been instrumental in doing that is this nasty man Trump. Come back to where we began this morning. Don't like the guy at all, but I rejoice in the fact that he's overturned the apple cart and got people to start thinking about their own responsibilities, particularly European leaders, so-called leaders. Yeah.
Okay, the best laid plans of mice and men. You just saw me sneeze. Mm-hmm. I won't sneeze again for another 12 hours, but for some reason I do. Can you see anything that we're not expecting that may throw the what's the word we use? The bull in the china shop. Something like COVID, for instance. You see anything unexpected that's going to leap out at the world leaders?
Well, COVID. Seeing the perspective of COVID is that historically, something like COVID happens in the world about every 10 years. There's major issues. I mean, going in recent times, going back to the, what was it called? Not the Asian flu and the First World War, the end of the First World War, that sort of thing. There's always these epidemics. We have a history of that. And we need to have learned from the way we handled COVID, which I think we handled very badly, as to how to face the next challenge. But these are unpredictable. We don't know what they are and what form and what shape they're going to take. There's a strong suspicion, mind you, that COVID was a manufactured exercise and escaped from the lab in China. Because all of the experiments that are going on around the world and this sort of thing are very dangerous. But there could be a medical scare. There could be another form of natural catastrophe. We very often have objects from outer space flying dangerously close to the Earth, and so something like that, a disaster, a natural disaster. But I don't see how we can factor those into our planning. We've got to get up in the morning, go to work, and in the belief that what we're doing is right. We're producing a product or providing a service. We're getting reasonably reimbursed for it. We can go home and look after our wife and kids and feed the dog, and at least go out to the local pub for a beer afterwards, assuming the local pub hasn't been forced out of existence by excessive taxation. Word on that, by the way, is I'm told that a publican, when he flogs a pint of beer in Britain, he makes a profit of about 14 pence. But every time he flogs a pint in Britain, the state, the taxman, takes £2.50.
Oh.
I mean, that is unbelievable. You might say, well, where's the rest of the money gone that you paid for the 4 or 5 quid pint for? Well, that's gone into obviously the brewery, the pockets, the manufacturing the beer, and the technical costs of running the pub, electricity, staff, wages, you name it. But I mean, that's the amazing thing, that who's making the money out of the pub is the government. £2.50 goes into the hands of the taxman, 14 pence into the hands of the publican. Scandalous. But anyway, the disappearance of the English pub, when I was a young man, there were 90,000 of them, and I think there's less than half that figure now. And these were the core center of community life and meeting places. Very, very important, much more important than drinking places. They were community centers, and when they go, I think part of the fabric of the nation will have gone.
Harry, we've spent a whole hour dissecting what's going on, and as usual, very perceptive. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know that it's perceptive. I mean, I'm pushing ideas that have come to my mind in the 90 years on this planet. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me, and that's reasonable too. They shouldn't. I mean,
that's the essence of democracy, isn't it?
Have their own analyses, but I've expressed my feelings, and that I stand by them. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I can be told I'm wrong, and I'm not always right. So I accept that. Yeah,
that's the important thing that we fight for: is being able to be told that we are wrong without wanting to break somebody's nose.
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll see you this time next week, Harry.
With pleasure. And then say goodbye to you and to everybody. So, next week, next Wednesday, same time, same place.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Cheers, Keith.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Well, Harry Atherton, and he may say that it's not perceptive, but it seems to me to be pretty perceptive stuff, and very insightful. And let's hope that he is around for, he says, 90 years on the planet. We could do with people like that for another 90 years, I think. But who knows? Oh dear. I think I'm probably going to have to say goodbye to you. Oh, hang on. Let's see if we can get Dr. Mark. Okie dokie. Because I've got this beautiful lady lurking because she wants to give me some medicines. So we'll take a couple of moments away from you and do that. And in the meantime, I'm going to say toodle pip. I think. I'd like something big enough for me to okay, invite guests to the studio. There we go. So, there we go. Okay.